Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured, why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say, I'm watching so-and-so show. And then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it. And that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about episode 5 of Apple TV's The Changeling, entitled This Woman's Work. So, I'm gonna get right to it. Not a big fan of this week's episode. Like, for starters, I don't think that title really aligns with the focus of the episode. Like, I thought about it, and then I thought, I guess if I squint, I could kind of see how this title is appropriate for this episode, but it's a stretch. I don't know. I don't know. I could see it, but I don't feel like I don't feel like you watch this episode and go, oh, that makes sense for a title. And then secondly, I thought this episode dragged a lot in the middle. And part of the reason for that drag is there were a lot of scenes that left me like, why is this here? Or this is taking way too long to tell me something I already know. Or that doesn't even feel plausible to me. And these things I believe to be symptomatic of not so great writing. And if you recall in my first video, I did express concerns about the lack of a, I don't want to say reputable, because I mean, Venom is not a disreputable film, but it's not like I didn't look at Kelly Marcel's writing credits and go, oh, I expect something good. I looked at that and went, uh-oh. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like my issues this week are things that I kind of saw potentially coming, and I feel like just the way this episode was kind of set up, it made it so that any weaknesses in the writing could be a little bit more evident, and I think we saw that this week. So this episode tells two stories. We see Apollo's experiences on the island with Cal. Side note, I didn't realize that Cal is, the actress who plays Cal is the mom from Malcolm in the Middle. Like, unrecognizable to me, which is interesting because I'm not going to say he looks not different at all, but like I feel like if you see Bryan Cranston now and you watch Bryan Cranston back then, you'd still recognize him. But then again, he has been a lot more present than she has, I think. You know, what was that little small show he was in? Breaking. Anyway, like I said, the episode tells two stories. Apollo's experiences on the island with Cal, and then we also see events leading up to Emma's actions surrounding Brian, but from Emma's perspective in the past. In the interest of keeping things neat and tidy, I'm going to approach talking about this episode the same way. I'm going to start with Emma's plotline because I thought it did some interesting things, but it also had some of the flaws that I talked about at the open. And then I also kind of want to save my thoughts on the ending of the episode for the end of the video. So starting with Emma's plotline, we open the episode with Emma, I don't want to say back in Brazil. She didn't go back, but in Brazil in the past, approaching the witch that we saw her approach in episode 1 or whatever that is, episode 3, I don't know. And I'm initially sitting there like, why do I need to see this again? But just with a longer lead up, because like they show her like walking through like the Brazilian rainforest and stumbling upon the witch again, and I'm like, okay, why am I seeing this again? But fortunately, that's not what happened. And we see Emma turn around and leave. She doesn't approach the witch at all. And a local man tells her what we already knew she was told, to not go back there and to not approach the witch. As we know, she does go back, but then we see what happens after she leaves. She hitches a ride with a guy that we come to understand is Leif Knudsen, the photographer who Emma's friend told Apollo about. Like, oh, she's been hanging with this photographer in Brazil, and he took this picture. Well, she took a picture of herself on his camera that was like, wow, scary. Like, that guy. If you recall, the friend told Apollo that Emma took a scary nude photo on this guy's camera, and eventually also we end up seeing that photo. Now, with that in mind, we have to sit through like an overly long sequence where the two of them walk through the two of them being Emma and Leif, walk through this very visually unappealing forest. It's like, if you think about if you watch The Last of Us, when they get to there's this one area where they get to like, you know, it rich and lush greenery in a world of desolation, and it's like it's so vibrant. This is the opposite of that. It's like if I just like walk through like overgrown brush in like a backyard in Detroit. That's what this felt like. Very visually unmoving and uninspiring, and it's kind of like a long walk. And I'm like, what's going on here? But that kind of brings me to the first issue that I had with this episode. Like I said at the top, I thought the middle really dragged. Between getting information we already knew in Emma's plot line, then spending the majority of Apollo's plot line listening to Cal like talking riddles and give no information, this episode felt kind of like sitting at a red light waiting for it to turn green again. Or if I don't even want to say a red light, because that implies a complete lack of movement, but you wouldn't sit at a yellow light. But it kind of feels like if you were sitting at like a yellow light, or moving very slowly through a yellow light as you approach it, waiting for it to turn green. That's kind of what this felt like. And that's not to say that the episode was bad or that I didn't enjoy it. It's just that the episode really only advanced the plot through conversations, and that made for a bit of a lag in the middle, especially when the conversations weren't advancing the plot. So anyway, Emma and Leif, they walk through this visually unappealing forest, and they arrive at, I don't know, some sort of ruins, it looks like, some overgrown area. He sets up his camera for whatever reason, because again, this is a very visually unappealing area. And Emma refuses to take a photo, so then he leaves to go pee for like 45 minutes. And like, so here's what happens. Emma walks up to the camera, she looks at it, fiddles with it, pushes a button which sets the timer, and you hear it start beeping. And she sets the timer to, like I said, what could only be nothing short of 45 minutes, because this guy's self-timer is unnecessarily lengthy. Like, she slowly takes off her shoes, slowly walks farther away from the camera, slowly disrobes, slowly turns her head to look at the camera, then slowly turns about. And again, this is another example of the episode needlessly dragging. Like, I feel like the deliberate pacing of this moment was meant to build tension, right? But there's two problems with that. One, you can't build tension when I already know what's gonna happen. Like, what am I gonna be tense about? If I don't know what's gonna happen, this pacing works, right? I'm gonna be nervous, like, what is she doing? What's gonna happen? And I may be willing to ignore the obnoxiously long and implausibly long self-timer. But I know exactly what she's doing, and I know exactly how it's going to end. So what are you building tension toward? All you're doing is, well, number two, my other problem with this sequence, you took me out of the scene by having it move so slow, because all I could think about is how ridiculously long this self-timer was. And I'm like, you hearing this thing beep constantly as a reminder, and I'm just like, they're thinking like, oh, we're going to build tension by having this go slow. And I'm sitting here like, one, I already know what's going to happen, so you can't build tension. And two, all I'm sitting here doing is wondering why the fuck this self-timer is so fucking long. Why is he said he's going to go pee. Is he shitting? Because there's no way he's going for this long to go pee. And it's just, it continued to pull me out of the moment. And even further, we later see Leif developing the pictures, right? And he's staring at the blank, white, undeveloped print as if he already knows it's gonna have a scary naked lady on it. I'm sitting there like, as far as he knows, he's just developing pictures that he took. Why does he look so fucking concerned and scared at a blank print? And it's like the episode was playing on the idea that we, the audience, know what's going to be on that picture. It's going to be Emma naked and scary looking. But he doesn't know, so what the fuck he looking so scared for? And like, I don't want to be mean. I really don't. But when I talked in that first video about Kelly Marcel's uninspiring filmography and how the fact that her only, I don't want to say real writing credits again, but like, you know, the most recognizable writing credits are the 2 Venom movies and something else. This is why that worried me. Like I don't know. A lot of this stuff I was like, this isn't really working. And I also thought the sequence with Emma holding Brian on the roof and she's like talking to him and expressing her doubts, and then it flashes back to her wedding and she throws a bouquet out into the street. And I'm just like, this is dull. And if I'm being honest, like an unnecessary scene as well. Like, I think it's meant to showcase like Emma's descent from someone who was concerned into someone who has made up her mind what she's going to do. But I wish that could have been showcased in a more interesting way, because after she throws the bouquet into the street, my first thought was like, what's the point of this scene? Then it goes back to Emma on the rooftop holding Brian, and she's like, I wish you could have seen that happier version of me. And I'm like, that's what we get that's what we got to sit through the sequence for? To learn about her hesitation and regret? You couldn't give me something more interesting than this? Like, this is a really boring scene. Like, I don't know, man. And we see Emma post on the Wise Ones, I'm gonna call it Facebook page, since I think it's clearly meant to be Facebook, but it's not called Facebook on the show. And she's like, hey, maybe it's just me, but have any of you guys ever thought that your baby wasn't your baby? like it got swapped out of the hospital or something? And again, kind of taking me out of the episode. I'm like, as far as I know, I thought this was just like a Facebook group for like mothers. No one's just gonna post that straight up. Like, oh, do you think your baby been stolen? Like, you ever think your baby is a demon? Like, no one's gonna post that on like a Facebook page. I don't know. It just, I don't know, man. There's just a lot of moments where I'm just kind of like, what is this? Am I supposed to accept this? So Cal messages her, asking if she's been getting disappearing text messages, and she confirms. And then what I thought was a cool moment, Emma gets a text while she's messaging with Cal, and the text is like, don't trust witches, haha. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of scary. And then she quickly screenshots it, and then the screenshot vanishes. I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. As the Emma plotline continues, we see things get worse for her, and I found this sequence interesting because I think it can be ambiguous what's going on with her. Like, we see several moments of Brian kind of like nipping at her, but we don't actually see it. We just really see like her reaction to it, and we hear like noises. And then there are times earlier where Brian's crying and it almost sounds like laughter, and then later it turns into straight like growling and snarling. And even though I believe these were Emma's real experiences, if one were to believe that Emma simply lost her marbles, she could be imagining all of this. And everything that happens to her always happens when no one else is around, of course. I'm sure that's intentional because the goal is to make Emma look crazy. But still, if you were to make the case at this point that Emma is just crazy and imagining all of this stuff, and then that prompted her to kill her baby, there's no evidence to say that you're wrong. There's just a bunch of events that seem real from Emma's perspective, which could be the perspective of a crazy person. So, like, we can't really trust it. However, really, that's kind of me just playing a bit of devil's advocate. I do believe that everything we see happening with Emma in this episode actually happened to Emma, and I'll get to why when I get to Apollo's plotline momentarily. So, we see Emma arrive at her apartment with the chains that we saw her pick up in, I don't know, one of the episodes 1 through 3. I think it was episode 3, the chains that were later used to tie up Apollo. And then we see her hurriedly setting up the baptism, which now has added weight and fright because you realize that she's doing it because she intends on killing the baby. Now, I don't know if it's like, let me get the baby baptized just in case I'm wrong and it's not a changeling and it's an actual baby. I want to make sure it enters the afterlife forgiven for its handful of months of nonsense. But it could be like, let me see if I can baptize away this demon as a last-ditch effort, so maybe I don't have to kill it. Maybe, a baptism instead of an exorcism, like Apollo said. You probably want to get an exorcism. Maybe that's what she looked at the baptism as being. Either way, her reason for doing the baptism is not the reason most people do baptisms. So the last we see of Emma's plotline is Apollo telling Emma that the baptism isn't going to happen, which we saw earlier in the season, and then presumably the last moments before Emma does the deed. Now, the Apollo plotline takes up a good portion of this episode with virtually nothing of value coming until the very end. It's mainly just Cal speaking cryptically and Apollo going, "Can you just answer me directly?" Like at one point, Apollo asks if Emma can be brought over by boat like William's wife Greta. And Cal is like, "No boat can bring Emma back from where she went." And both me and Apollo are like, "What the fuck does that even mean? Can you just answer the fucking question?" And I can only deal with vague cryptic answers for so long because they irritate me. They're like a sign of characters not behaving as they would in real life. Like if a character gives non-answers to questions in a show or a movie, I instantly get irritated if the person doesn't go, "That's not an answer to my question." Like that, that just bothers me. I don't know. I mean, I know why, because like I said, I feel like in real life, if I say, "Can you bring Emma on a boat?" and then the reply is, "No boat can bring Emma back from where she came from," I'm gonna be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Answer the fucking question I ask you." So if anyone says something other than that in response, I kind of roll my eyes because I'm like, come on. But Apollo does pretty much say that, and that was satisfying for me. Rewinding briefly, Cal releases Apollo from his cell to kind of like start the Cal plotline, but leaves a significantly more deranged William in his cell, saying she'd have killed him, but she wanted to let Greta do it. So, I just want to throw that in real quick. So, Apollo and Cal are walking, and that's where we get a lot of the cryptic non-answers that irritated me in this episode. Eventually, Apollo and Cal arrive at something of like almost like a small town on the Wise Ones Island here. It has a school, it has a library that Emma helped fill. All kinds of shit like that. Just like it looks like a small little town in the Old West. Coupling this sequence with that portion of Emma's plot line with the wedding flashback and that kind of shit. This, like I said, this is when the episode was, I think, at its worst. Cal continues to give cryptic non-answers. Apollo meets this girl named Gail who like falls off of his scooter, and then he helps her up, and then she goes like 3 feet and falls again. I'm like, how am I supposed to take this episode seriously right now? And then there's gonna be like another puppet show, which the puppet thing was weird the first time, and I was just like, man, this needs to get somewhere really. This needs to go somewhere really fucking fast. Fortunately, it does though, as Cal decides to finally give real information. Basically, she confirms that the women there all have had the same experience. And when I say the same experiences as Emma, you know what that means. And that Apollo's book from his father is basically the real deal. So I'm going to take this time to remind you guys about my theory from last week surrounding Apollo's parents. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole theory. Go watch the video if you don't recall. But I just want to say, like Cal is like, "I don't know why your father gave you this book, but..." And I'm sitting in my head thinking of my theory from last week. Like, I might know why he gave him that book. But anyway, we end the episode with Greta arriving on the island. We learned that William stole the $70,000 that he used to buy Apollo's book from Greta, and that he then defaced the book by writing the name of their dead daughter on every page. The dead daughter that we learned that he in fact killed, not her. And then he sent her the book, with the defaced book with the dead daughter's name on every page, which is like the fucking ultimate fucking troll job. I mean, that troll isn't even a strong enough word for what he did. When Apollo confronts William about this, he's no longer William. He's talking about he found like-minded people, and that allowed him to remove the face of William Wheeler and be his true self. And then when he became his true self, he was then given his true name. And Apollo's like, "Well, what's that real name?" And before I get my thoughts on the final lines, I want to point out a couple of things real quick. One, Apollo's book, To the Waters and the Wild, is based on a line that appears several times in a real W.B. Yeats poem called The Stolen Child. Do with that information what you will. And then two, the line we've heard Apollo repeat over and over from that book all of this season is, "Babies are dreams made real, and dreams are fairies' favorite meal." So like I said, Apollo asked what this guy's name, we'll get to why I mentioned that. Apollo asked what this guy's name is, and he says, "You know my name," and he references a meal inspired by Brian and boiled vegetables. And Apollo replies saying, "Kindergarten?" And the episode ends. Now, I feel like a lot of you are probably like, "What the fuck kind of ending is this?" And rightfully so. You're supposed to be like, well, you're not supposed to be like, "What the fuck?" But your "what the fuck" is valid. It's validated. So now you may recall the tribute page that was created for Brian. We learned about it, I want to say, at episode 2. Brian and Patrice were talking, and Patrice tells him about this tribute page for Brian. And it was made while Apollo was in prison. And when Apollo's looking at it, there's like there's some positivity, but there's like shitty trolling messages. Like in my video, I even said something like, yeah, shitty people being shitty, leaving horrific comments about this guy's dead kid. The comments are referenced here. The meal inspired by Brian, that was in the comments. The boiled vegetables, because remember, Emma had that teapot of hot water when she was going to kill Brian. There was a comment, something about baby back ribs. Lots of really tasteless trolling comments on the tribute page about the nature in which Brian died. The username? Kindergarten. And it's spelled like an actual name, too. Not like kindergarten, like if you're going to school. 2 words, because I had it all with the captions on. 2 words, each capitalized. Kinder with a capital K, Garten with a capital G. So that now makes sense. He's basically saying, I'm the motherfucker that was writing all those shitty things on the tribute page. And furthermore, I believe William to be like the big bad. Like he's the person that's behind those pictures, those pictures that were taken of Apollo and Brian from afar that were sent to Emma, responsible for the disappearing text, responsible for the changelings, and not just the Brian changeling, but all the other changelings. Basically, I believe William / Kindergarten is the fairy from Apollo's book whose favorite meal is babies. So that makes the book, why the book is so relevant, and that's who I believe William to be. And I like this reveal a lot, but it relied way too heavily on knowing the messages from the tribute page, which I only know because since I do these videos, when things are written on the screen, like if there's like a page from a book or a letter, I pause it so I can read the whole thing, because a lot of times shows or movies will like put something like that on the screen, only give you a little bit of time to read it, and then they cut so they can kind of like use it to surprise you later. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna pause it, I'm gonna read this. So like, I do that a lot, and because I make these videos, I watch everything with like a fine-tooth comb through a magnifying glass, whatever you want to call it. And because I do that, it allowed me to recognize those references, the boiled vegetables and the meal inspired by, like, I remembered that from the fucking tribute page. So like, that made sense to me, and it helped that ending land. But if you're just casually watching this because you're not making a fucking YouTube channel or writing reviews or doing a podcast or whatever, you're just watching it, you probably got to that ending like, well, what the fuck is this? Like, what the fuck are they talking about? And again, I harken back to Kelly Marcel's writing credits. Like, this is why I was concerned. It's a cool reveal if the foundation for it had been properly laid. Virtually no one is watching the show with the level of detail required to catch that reference. And it's a weighty reveal that is likely to fall flat with a lot of people who don't watch the show with a magnifying glass like I do. So while I thought the ending was satisfying, and I feel like this episode set up like the rest of the season to be pretty compelling, I just felt like this episode dragged a lot, and I feel like the flaws in the writing were evident and they hurt it. And you know, like, while I did think this was a down episode, it did properly set up how the rest of the season could go, and I'm excited for that. You know, I expect the show to get back on track next week. But like I said, this episode relied heavily on the writing, both within this episode and from previous episodes. And when a weak spot is highlighted in this way, issues are more evident, and that caused the episode, I think, to not be nearly as engrossing as the previous 4. So we needed this episode to move forward, and I think we are going to be able to move forward, and I think we're going to finish the season strong with however many episodes. I think there's 8, so that means we would have 6, 7, 8, 3 left. I'm hopeful that what's coming is going to be good. I expect it to be. I expect we'll be back on track next week. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments, and I will see you guys next week for episode 6. And until then, peace.